Start the recording. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly Bellabono. I'm the Executive Director at ACE MV, which is Adult and Continuing Education. And we are here with a number of our community partners to share information with you about this wonderful program that we've got going that we launched this year, and we're getting ready to bring on our second group of students in January. It's the Offshore Wind Technician Certificate program, and we're doing it in partnership with Bristol Community College. It's a certificate through Bristol, and with Vineyard Power Cooperative and with Vineyard Wind, and we're all here to share information and answer questions. So this is a listening session, an informational session. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat at the bottom of your screen. We'll be looking through the chat periodically and answer all the questions that we can. For our panelists, if you could mute yourselves while you're not speaking, that would be helpful. I'll introduce everybody as you come up. First, I want to introduce Richard Andre and Eric Pekar from Vineyard Power Cooperative. They're going to start us out with some videos and information about the offshore wind industry and what it means for Martha's Vineyard and where it's going and why it's important. And then I'll follow up with information about the certificate itself and how you can enroll and register and get college credits and get this credential here on Martha's Vineyard. And just to mention, this is a Martha's Vineyard project. We've partnered with Bristol with the understanding that we're offering these classes for vineyard residents. I noticed that there were a number of people who registered for this open house that don't live on Martha's Vineyard. If you're planning to move here, wonderful. If you're here part-time, that's fine, but this is primarily for vineyard residents. If you live on the Cape or on the mainland somewhere, you can get this same credential from Bristol Community College at their New Bedford campus. So if you have questions about that, we'll help you figure that out if you live elsewhere. So Richard, do you want to introduce yourself and take it on?
Thank you so much, Holly. So I'm Richard Andre with Vineyard Power Cooperative, and I'm here with my colleague, Eric Pekar. And we'll start off the presentation about the industry and about the opportunity here on the South Coast, and especially the opportunity on the vineyard. And then I'm going to segue into my colleague, Jen Cullen from Vineyard Wind. So we're going to tag team the presentation. Keep the questions coming and then we'll answer them probably towards the end of the presentation. So first of all, Vineyard Power Cooperative, we're an island cooperative. We have about 3,500 members on the island of Martha's Vineyard. Our mission is to produce electricity from local renewable resources like solar and wind. And a lot of vineyarders on the call will know, the parking lot canopy solar projects at Kronig's, with electric vehicle charging stations on them. That's a Vineyard Power project. We also did some solar projects for the town of Chilmark and Aquina, as well as the Boys and Girls Club. But this presentation is more about another opportunity, which is the burgeoning offshore wind industry that's coming to our shores very, very soon. So with that, Eric is going to tee up a slide presentation, and as he does that, so our mission is to do that, and our vision is to have 100% renewable energy economy by 2040. So this is as Holly mentioned, this is the second open house that we're doing this year. We held one back in October, and then last year we held 2 open houses as well. So these are great forums for us to introduce the program and for people that are interested in actually answer the questions. And as Holly mentioned, we already have about 15 students that are already enrolled in this program. So they're about to finish, they're about to finish. They're probably 3/4 of the way through their second semester, right? They started, and now we're talking about a new cohort that will start in January. So why offshore wind in the US and why offshore wind in the Northeast? A colleague of mine speaks about renewable energy across the country, and one of the messages that she communicates is that in each region of the country, there'll be different solutions, right? In the Southwest, for example, the United States, they're not focused on offshore wind. They'll be focused on large solar development. In the Pacific Northwest, there may be offshore wind later coming, but a lot of their energy is going to be renewable energy will come from hydro. But in the Northeast, our answer is wind. From the image you see on the left, which is just a great satellite image, at night, you get to see a lot of the population centers. And what you see there is just an illustration of some interesting facts, which are, 40% of the US population lives in a county that borders the coast. So, for example, that would include Dukes County or Barnstable County or Bristol County. Or Nantucket County. So, but 40% of the U.S. population lives in counties that are bordering the coast, and something like 80% of the population lives within 100 miles of the coast. So, something we may already know, but our population centers are concentrated on the coast. And what you see in the Northeast is, I remember when I grew up, it was called the megalopolis, and it's still a word that's you can kind of Google. That really was the term to define the metro area from Boston to Washington. And that's that real big bright streak you see up in the upper right-hand corner, where 55 million Americans live. So we have large population centers on the coast. That's why offshore wind is very attractive, because you can build offshore wind close to the demand for the electricity without having to spend or to do a lot of overland transmission lines, which across rural or other parts of the United States. So on the right, you see the wind resources, and that's from the National Renewable Energy Labs, a federal agency that's based out in Colorado. And that's just a classification of wind quality, the quality of wind and how, wind speeds. And what you see up in the Northeast is a region of 6 and 7s. So we live, and I've heard it described, it's not, the greatest expression, but we live in the, the Saudi Arabia of wind. So there's a tremendous amount of wind, and people that obviously live up here know that, and especially in the seasons from September right through to June and July. So close to the populations, and actually a really, really good resource. There's enough wind resource on the East Coast and Northeast to power all of the electricity in the Northeast. And we'll come back to that a little later on. So that's the marriage of population, demand, and the wind resource. So with that, back in, anyway, a lot of us on the call and a lot of us have been paying attention in the newspapers, reading about offshore wind, and it may be new to us or new to some about the industry. But in fact, in 2009, the federal government came to our region, and they held their first outreach meeting at MASS Maritime Academy in Bourne. They've held over 24 meetings out here, the federal government, and both on the Vineyard, on Nantucket, and on the mainland, to kind of begin a process in 2009, as I mentioned, to lease the outer continental shelf for offshore wind development. And what you see here is either areas that were designated for leasing for offshore wind, or areas that are being considered to be leased for offshore wind. So it just depends on where they are in the process. Massachusetts and Rhode Island were very early on. What you see to the left or to the west of us in New York, some green and purple. The purple areas have not yet been designated to be leased. They're still under study, but they will be leased in the next 4 years. And then all the way down to lease areas that are kind of off of Virginia, and the lease areas continue on south. Currently, there are 15 offshore wind developers that are holding leases. Vineyard Wind, who Jen Cullen is employed by, they have 2 of the 15, and you can see that area there being pointed out in the dark blue, and there's an area in the light blue furthest to the east. So Vineyard Wind has 2 lease areas out of the 15. There's currently now 29,000 megawatts of contracts that have been offered up for offshore wind developers to supply. There's No, I'm sorry. Let me restate that. There's 29,000 megawatts right now that the states along the eastern coast have set as targets to purchase. So Massachusetts will have set targets, New York will have set targets, and so forth, and those equal 29,000. Currently, there's about 6,500 megawatts that are under contract that's being developed, and Vineyard Wind is one of those. Vineyard Wind has 1,600 megawatts under contract out of the 6,400. So Vineyard Wind is doing quite well. And what you'll see here is out of the stated procurement targets and solicitations is an industry that's ready to really get going in the next year or so. So there's a little a picture of our region of the Cape and the South Coast and Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. And what you now focusing on is one of the lease areas that Vineyard Wind holds. That's in a lease area known as 501. And the Vineyard Wind project, or Vineyard Wind 1 project, right now is being developed in the upper portion of that lease. So you see it's not the full lease area, it's only the upper portion. You can see that marked with dots that represent turbine locations. Those turbines will produce electricity from the wind on renewable resources and connect to the mainland through an undersea cable that's in yellow. And in fact, the dotted line to the right of that yellow is in fact the route that it will take. And that's very nicely highlighted by Eric. Thank you very much. And the wind farm will connect in the town of Barnstable, and then have a short several mile overland, which will be under the ground cable connection to a substation in Barnstable as well. And just to point out, that undersea cable that's connecting to the wind farm is also another cable, but remember that Martha's Vineyard is already connected by 4 undersea cables to the mainland, and Nantucket is connected by 2 undersea cables. Currently, Nantucket, through Eversource, is studying the need for a 3rd cable, and in Martha's Vineyard is not too far behind for a 5th cable. So undersea cables are pretty common in the area, and as well as our new cable that will be coming as well. The Vineyard Wind project is 800 megawatts of capacity. That's enough energy for 400,000 homes. And just to give everyone a little bit of I've been speaking about megawatts, and those are always pretty hard for people to kind of relate to if you're not in the industry. So we like to kind of translate how much energy does an 800 megawatt wind farm produce, and that's enough energy for 400,000 homes. Now, some of you may know this, but there's only 16,000 homes, for example, on Martha's Vineyard, right? Approximately. There's approximately 10,000 homes on Nantucket. So 400,000 homes not only supplies all of the homes on the Vineyard and Nantucket, it supplies all of the homes on Cape Cod, which is Barnstable County. And in fact, it even supplies enough energy to supply homes that are in Plymouth County. So it's a very large amount of electricity. It represents about 6% of the state's demand. And it reduces a lot of CO2, right? The great thing about, there's 2 great things about offshore wind. One of them is you produce all of the electricity that we need as a society and that we want as consumers, but you produce it from renewable resources, not fossil fuels. And the second benefit on that is it creates a tremendous amount of local jobs, which we're going to be talking about. But 325,000 cars, or the equivalent of 325,000 cars being removed from the road every year is the equivalent of what this project does as far as emissions. And I just want to take a pause here to go back, not to go back physically, but just to recall my previous slide. When we talk about 29,000 megawatts of procurement, that's 36 Vineyard Wind 1 projects, right? It would be enough to power 14 million homes. It would be enough to, enough emissions out of the system for 12 million vehicles. And then, we said earlier in that slide, 52,000 megawatts of potential. That's 65 projects, or 25 million homes. So, and to put into scale, there's only 2 million homes in Massachusetts. So offshore wind, as I said in my first slide, is clean, renewable energy close to population centers, and is enough electricity to power most of the Northeast. So it's what we need to address climate change and to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. So those turbines that you see are 15, just one second, Eric, if you don't mind. They're 15 miles south of Cape Cod. I'm sorry, south of the Vineyard, 35 miles south of the Cape. And what I want to highlight here is the two major ports for this project are going to be New Bedford, where most of the construction and deployment will be occurring in the construction phase. And the exciting thing for us here in Martha's Vineyard is Vineyard Haven will be the hub for the operations and maintenance facilities. Thanks, Eric. So this is just a schematic, just to give everyone a sense of an offshore wind farm and some of the jobs associated with. On the far right, you see a vessel or a barge that has 4 pylons. That's a barge that will be out at sea, but then it will lower its legs, those 4 blue pylons, and lift itself above the water to create a stable working environment, of which on top of sits cranes and other equipment, and in fact, components of the offshore wind farm, monopiles, the nacelles, which is the units that technicians will be working on, the machine, and blades that they then use, to build the wind farm. You have the wind turbine generator. In my previous slide, I mentioned 62 turbines will be deployed in the Vineyard Wind 1 project. If you can go back, Eric, I'm sorry. Those turbines sit on monopiles that are embedded in the foundations in the seabed. They're all connected by cables. They all connect to an electric service platform, which will have a helicopter landing pad on top of it, which then has the export cables that go to shore to an onshore substation, like I mentioned earlier. So that's just a simple schematic that should help you as the presentation continues. So with that said, Eric's gonna show a video. Oh no, I got one more slide, apologize, yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the operations and maintenance facility. So why is that operations maintenance facility here on Martha's Vineyard? Well, it's here because Vineyard Power and Vineyard Wind signed a community benefit agreement back in 2015. We had been working together since 2010, and part of the partnership was, how do we successfully develop renewable energy and offshore wind, and how do we make sure that the local communities that will be living close to these projects benefit from them? We all know that our coastal communities are going to be on the first line of threat from climate change, rising sea level, ocean acidification. And I noticed one of our neighbors, Dan Martino's on the phone, who owns Cottage City Oysters, which is a great local business that I like to support. Ocean acidification will be near and dear to oyster farmers, because when you acidify the ocean, you actually hurt or damage the ability for oysters to make their shells. So we're on the front line, and part of the process of us addressing climate change is also making sure we ensure we get the jobs. So we're committed to Vineyard Haven as a working waterfront, and the project we're talking about is a major investment in Vineyard Haven, something in the order of $15 million. We're going to have 100% of that staff in the first 5 years of operation be vineyarders, and we're talking about plus or minus 40 jobs. In this case, though, we're speaking about 25 plus or minus technician jobs, but there'll be other jobs besides technicians. And the workforce fund that Vineyard Wind is working and in fact contributing funds to is what's enabling and helping Holly at ACE-MV offer tuition support and financial aid to interested island residents to take the course, and also families of fishermen and shell fishermen have the ability to also receive scholarships and so forth. And then finally, on this slide, it was announced this week that Vineyard Wind has announced that General Electric is going to be their preferred turbine supplier. In other words, supplying the 62 turbines that I mentioned will be General Electric turbines. We're super excited about this news. It's a fantastic American company. They'll be coming to Martha's Vineyard. Most of the technicians will end up working on will work on their machines and probably even, be GE employees, at least initially. they're going to bring a lot of talent and a lot of resources to the island, and they're going to bring a lot of talent and resources to the South Coast as well. So we're super excited that General Electric was chosen as the supplier. Now, GE is not here with us today, but they will be coming out to the Vineyard over the next few months. And Eric and I and Jen, we will reach out through Holly to make sure that our students that are enrolled or students that are wishing to be enrolled will have a chance to meet General Electric and find out more about that company. So the next few slides are just images of the $15 million investment in the Vineyard Haven Harbor. So islanders that are on the call will know that's effectively when you come over the drawbridge from Eastville into Vineyard Haven, that's going to be on the first thing that you see coming over. There's going to be a public beach that's built, and you see the public beach platform. That's something that Vineyard Wind is doing to ensure public access to a beautiful beach that sits at the head of the harbor. The facility in the back, you see a pilot supported pier with cars on it, containers. You see 2 crew transfer vessels, which will be located at that facility. Those crew transfer vessels will not only be bringing technicians out to the wind farm or scientists or engineers out to the wind farm, but it will also be transporting spare parts and equipment and tools. They will be going out to the wind farm on a daily basis in the morning and returning in the evening. You see an office complex in brown with the windows sitting in front of a warehouse, and the warehouse will be inside the warehouse, and in the office will be locker rooms, changing facilities, a warehouse with spare parts and equipment, personal protection equipment. You see some solar panels on top of that roof, and there's some other views as well that will spin around. That's a view that one might see in 3 years when you're on the island home, either leaving Vineyard Haven Harbor or coming into Vineyard Haven. That's just another view of the vessels and the warehouse facility. And maybe there's one more. No. So now we're gonna launch a video. Eric's gonna launch a video installing an offshore wind farm, and then Jen Cullen, my partner, is going to pick up the presentation after that. Thank you.
Hey, Richard, before we hand it over to Eric, we've got a question that relates with what you were just talking about GE as a turbine manufacturer. Michael McGarty on the call says, hello, everyone. Will the curriculum change due to GE replacing MHI Vestas as the turbine manufacturer? And will GE contribute to education and training funding as an American company supporting this new domestic industry? So
Yes,
great questions. And I'm wondering maybe Sarmad, if you're interested, could jump on and talk about curriculum, and Richard and Eric, if you know anything about GE's commitment to education and training funding.
Yeah. So Michael, thank you so much for the great question. So Michael, one way to maybe think this through is a pie chart. And 50% of the pie chart, so half of the pie, is training that is relevant to whatever turbine is being used in the industry. And there are 3 turbine manufacturers in offshore wind. It's General Electric, then there is Siemens Gamesa, and MHI Vestas, which you mentioned. So 50% of all of the training doesn't depend on the turbine supplier. That's what this program is focusing on. This program is focusing on the basic technical requirements for an offshore wind technician, irregardless of the turbine manufacturer. Now, the other 50%, Michael, definitely depends on the turbine supplier. And that other 50% tends to be training that is provided by the employer or by the company who owns the turbines, because every turbine is slightly different. So you're going to get the building blocks in this Bristol Community College certification, and then when you're actually hired by GE, they will then build upon that and give some of the specifics about GE. In addition, Michael, something that Jennifer will touch on later, this project is going to depend not only on those 2 crew transfer vessels, this project will also depend on helicopters. Not all projects depend on helicopters as robust as this one will be. So yes, there'll be additional training, for example, with helicopter safety and so forth. So Michael, this is a really good building block, irregardless. So even Michael, if you were going to eventually work on another wind farm, all of this curriculum is going to be beneficial, and then you'll just train with that employer on their specific turbine. So I hope that answers your question. And if Jennifer or Yashwant want to add, they're free to add.
Okay, and then the other part was about education and training funding, and I don't know the answer to that. I do know that a lot of industry partners are working with Massachusetts Clean Energy Center and funding the MASS CEC, which in turn distributes to fund a variety of training and education programs across the state at all levels, at the certificate level up to the master's degree level. So it's possible that GE will do the same thing and support MASS CEC, which will then work with the partners to get the training and education on the ground.
Yeah, and Holly, if it wasn't clear, but once you're hired by GE, they're constantly training their employees on their machines. So it's pretty much going to be like that. Okay, thanks. So with that, we're going to show a little video about installing an offshore wind farm, and then I'm going to hand over, as I said, to Jen. Thank you.
Installing wind turbines offshore is a team effort. Every time a new turbine starts producing power, it's a celebration of superior engineering, built on years of experience. Bringing a wind power plant to life is an awe-inspiring task carried out by dedicated specialists. At MHI Vestas Offshore Wind, we are an industry pioneer with over 20 years' experience installing offshore wind turbines. Installing wind turbines offshore takes place in several distinct steps, all of which require many months of planning and preparation. At MHI Vestas's pre-assembly site on the southwestern coast of Denmark, the wind turbine components are delivered from the factories before a specialized crew starts the pre-assembly.
What we do down here is put on the fiberglass shells on the hub, and mount the cooler tops, and configure the nacelles for the offshore location. So it's more or less plug and play for them offshore.
The towers are fully erected, the nacelles are equipped and tested as fully functioning turbines before they are lifted onto the vessel. This process ensures time spent offshore is minimized, significantly reducing installation costs.
A little bit more, just
The turbine components are bolted and strapped to the deck of the installation vessel, holding in total components for 8 complete wind turbines. In this project, a total of 43 wind turbines are being installed at Luchterdijnen, 25 kilometers off the coast of Holland.
biggest challenge is that you're always working in an environment that changes by the hour. I'm extremely positive on Luchterdijnen, whereby we have seen in MHI Vestas a party that was together with us, very proactive. Things are simply much more costly to do offshore. So everything is in the preparation.
When the vessel arrives at the site, the installation phase begins. Each turbine is installed in less than a day. The tower is lifted onto the foundation, followed by the nacelle, and then the 3 blades.
Now the project is in operation. We can see what the performance is of the turbines. And what I can tell is that last month we have seen a 99.3% of availability. Well, that is extremely high.
MHI Vestas Offshore Wind takes a leading role in the industry growth for the future. Let's move the horizon.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jen Cullen. I am Vineyard Wind's Manager of Workforce and Supply Chain Development. So I've been working really closely with Richard and Eric and Holly on the islands to make sure that we have the programs in place. when we are looking to hire these technicians to make sure that they're trained and ready to go to be serving our projects. So I'm just going to walk through some more general workforce development slides just to give some context. So there are a variety of skill sets that we need when we're building offshore wind, everything from the planning and development, which are the phases that we're currently in on our projects, through permitting, planning the projects, the engineering. There's construction of the projects, which will be done using skilled labor. And so that is the onshore facilities that we need to connect the wind farm, the offshore vessel operations, the offshore construction, everything that happens at the port. And then what we're focusing on tonight with this particular technician training program, which is the operation and maintenance of the facilities and the skills that are needed for that. So in addition to the actual operations and maintenance technicians that will be going out to the wind farm every day, there's a variety of skill sets that are going to be needed to maintain these wind farms for the long haul, including managers, engineers. Richard mentioned the helicopter operators, and some ongoing monitoring and research that'll be happening in the wind farm area. Next slide, please. So when it comes to working offshore, there's a unique set of skills and requirements that will be required of the workers. Safety is a huge priority of this industry. It has some of the most rigorous safety standards of any industry in the world that has been developed over the course of the almost 30 years that this industry has been in existence overseas in Europe. And so that is one thing as we bring this industry here to the US. Oftentimes we get questions about what existing US safety standards apply when you're working, 35 miles plus offshore. And the industry has evolved to develop a unique and standardized set of safety requirements across all aspects of construction and maintenance of the projects that we are going to be adopting here in the US. So because these contractors work globally, they are accustomed to utilizing this standard set of safety requirements. And one of the first things that we had to do when we were looking at setting up workforce development was ensure that these particular safety training programs would be available to the local workforce. And I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what that means in the next couple of slides. But I think we can all appreciate, those of us that are familiar with coastal conditions, they can be especially rough out in the Atlantic. And so it's going to be, there are unique needs that we need to take into consideration. Getting from a moving vessel onto a fixed structure that far out in the ocean can be very dangerous if it's not done safely. And so that's why, these standards have been developed over so many years. Because you are going so far offshore, these technicians also need a really diverse set of technical skills. You can only fit so many people on a turbine at any given time. Technicians need to be able to do a variety of skills across the needs of maintaining the turbine. And so that's why, the training that can be done through this particular training program with ASMV and BCC, as well as the training that the OEMs, which are the turbine suppliers, will provide, is really critical. Training is a very important aspect of this entire industry. Next, please. So there are certainly challenges in building out this industry from scratch here. We only have a handful of turbines in the water here in the US, 5 off of Block Islands, 2 down in Virginia. And the Block Island turbines are really considered a nearshore project. They're pretty close to the islands. They don't have the same conditions that we will experience out where Vineyard Wind will be built. And so it's challenging because when it comes to actual on-the-job training, we just don't have facilities that are built here yet. So that training most likely will be conducted in Europe. We're still working on exactly what that will look like for the way that GE does things. The safety standards, I spoke about that, they even exceed that we see for onshore construction. The Gulf is not nearly as windy, and most of the workforce that we have up here in the Northeast, hasn't worked offshore in a way that there are people that have some of that experience that have worked down in oil and gas off the coast in the Gulf. So the training programs, the safety training programs, are now established in Bourne at Mass Maritime. And then there's another facility in Connecticut that we have worked with to offer these types of trainings. Again, because you're going so far offshore, the way that these shifts will work for construction, most of the technicians that are doing installation and construction of the wind farm will actually live offshore in what's called accommodation vessels. For Vineyard Wind 1, we don't anticipate that need. There may be smaller stints that we'll need to accommodate for people to stay offshore for a few days at a time. But for the most part, we anticipate that these shifts will be 10 to 14 days on, 10 to 14 days off for 10 to 12 hours a day. For future projects, it's anticipated that the shifts and the rotations will actually require these maintenance technicians to live offshore. So they'll go offshore for their rotation. They'll live on an accommodation vessel, which is kind of like a floating hotel in the wind turbine area. They'll work 12-hour days for their 14-day shift, and then they'll go home and have 14 days off. But all of that is more contemplated for future projects that are going to be even further offshore than Vineyard Wind 1 is from the Vineyard. Next, please. So the safety training that I've been referencing is called the Global Wind Organization Basic Safety Training. It's required for pretty much every individual working offshore for construction and for operations and maintenance. And oftentimes many workers that are dealing with turbine components and other pieces of equipment onshore, because it's been developed with the particular needs of offshore wind farms in mind. It consists of 5 modules. So first aid, manual handling, fire awareness, working at heights, and sea survival. And that sea survival module is the one that makes it unique clearly to the offshore wind industry. And that is one that was not offered here in the US until very recently. And the Mass Clean Energy Center workforce training grants that Holly had mentioned was actually able to help fund Mass Maritime to be able to offer this training. And we anticipate it'll be available at Bristol Community College fairly soon as well. So making sure that that training is available and accessible by the local workforce is really important. And in addition to the fact that it takes 5 days to complete, it needs to be recertified every 2 years. So the industry is very serious about making sure that its employees are up to date on their training and fully aware of how to conduct these operations safely. Next, please. So this is just to show, our turbines won't be this close. They'll also be bigger than this, but this is one way that you get a technician from land to a turbine. We don't anticipate necessarily helicopter transfers every day, but it's certainly important that technicians are trained to be able to do this sort of transfer onto the turbine. And as you can see, that's a pretty intense way to get to work every day. So it's going to be important that people that are interested in these types of careers are really aware of the types of conditions and trainings and day-to-day lifestyle that's going to be required to do this type of work. Next, please. So because of the helicopter transfer, there's another training that's required called the helicopter underwater escape training. Again, not every worker is necessarily going to be commuting by helicopter every day, but it is going to be critical that they have this type of training, because even if that's not the case, any sort of emergency situation would require a potential helicopter situation. And so this training, again, it's offered in Connecticut. Richard and I actually did it. It's a very intense training. It teaches you kind of how to behave and how to safely escape from any sort of underwater helicopter crash. And technically the training lasts for 4 years, But again, the offshore wind industry is so strict, they require it be recertified every 2. Next, please. So we're just going to play another video. We have a couple more videos just to show really what it's like doing this type of job. So this is Stephen Fisher. He works on an offshore wind farm in the UK. And he'll kind of walk through, and you'll see in the video, you know, the day-to-day of doing this type of work as an O&M technician.
Some days you get to see the sun rise, the sun set. You do get some days where you're actually working above the clouds and you can't see anything for miles. I'm Stephen Fisher, I'm 33 years old, I live in Dover. I'm a level 7 service team leader for Dong Energy at London Array in Ramsgate. My day-to-day basis is working 20 kilometres offshore in the North Sea, working at an average about 100 metres above sea level. We're here at London Array, operating the maintenance facility in Ramsgate Harbour, ready for a lovely 12-hour shift ahead of us. Let's go inside, we'll pick up some paperwork, the tools we need for the day, and of course the team we're going to work with. Let's go in. Paperwork is very important because it puts in the isolations for when we're working on certain parts of the turbine during the day, makes it safe for everyone to work. Next step would be to come into the warehouse. Main thing that you want to get together would be your own kit bag. Everything that goes in there would be your climbing harness that we have to wear for transferring between the vessel and to the turbine as well. If the sea temperature is below 10 degrees, we have to wear an immersion suit, which is not the nicest thing, but if you fall in, it will save your life. But the best thing you need to put in there, because you're a long way offshore, make sure you've got your lunch, because if you haven't got your lunch, you can't just nip to the shop and go and buy something. Then we have a nice little brisk walk down to the pontoons, where we'd load all our bags onto the boats. When we arrive onto a turbine, the boat will push onto the transition piece, which is the lower part of the turbine. We'll then step across onto the ladder of the transition piece, where there'll be a nice 15-metre climb if it's high tide. If it's low tide, it's a little bit more. And then it's a nice climb up to the first part of the turbine. I like extreme things, and you don't get much more extreme than climbing the ladder 20-odd kilometres out in the sea. When you get to the top of the turbine, that's the best part, because you open up a hatch, you climb out, and then you actually are 100 metres above the sea, and you get to see the beautiful views. Basically, it's like servicing your car. You have to go onto the turbine, you have to take some filters off, put some fresh oil in certain places, you have to crawl underneath some very tight spaces, or even climb inside one of the blades to change the grease inside. The best thing about the job are the views that you get working on top of one of these wind turbines. You can see on a clear day for 40 miles, and all you can see around you is wind turbines and sea. On a really clear day, you can see land in the distance, and then you realise how far you are offshore. Unfortunately, there are no toilet facilities on one of these wind turbines. So if you do need to go to the toilet, it means climbing all the way back down, getting onto the boat, and then having to do all that again, climbing back up. So it can be very tiring. I do enjoy downhill mountain biking, living life on the edge sometimes, like little things that keep the fitness up, but also keep the blood pumping through the body. Family life for me, when I have got my time off, I do like to spend a lot of time with my 5-year-old son. Every time he sees one on the news, the first thing he says is, "Dad, is that one of yours? Is that where you work?" But unfortunately, 9 times out of 10 on the news, they're always the small ones. It's never the big ones that we work on. quite a big thing to work on this project because London Array itself is now in the Guinness Book of Records for being the world's largest offshore wind farm. So it's quite an achievement to say that you can work on somewhere that is the world's largest, and it's a great feeling coming to work every day, knowing that you're going out there and you're part of the history books, really. I'd say it's the best career choice you'll ever make. Renewable energy is going to be a big thing in the future. If you can get in there now, you've got a job for life. What better opportunity than to get paid to climb up a turbine every day? Because this job's just amazing, how the opportunity you have to go and work in a place like that. Not everyone gets to do that sort of thing. Well, it's 6 o'clock in the evening. I hope you've really enjoyed a day in the life of me, Stephen Fisher, wind turbine technician here at London Array at Ramsgate Harbour. All that's left to do now is clock off and let's go home.
All right, so that was Stephen Fisher. We just really like that video because I think it gives a good sense of what it's like working out there, the kind of work that gets done, and Stephen Fisher's attitude about the adventure of it. And we won't necessarily have the largest wind farm with this Vineyard Wind one, but right now the turbine that we've selected, we're excited because it is the world's largest commercially available turbine. So that's pretty cool. They're, almost 13 megawatts machines, and they're massive. So life on an accommodation vessel. Again, we don't anticipate this necessarily will be required for Vineyard Wind 1, but for future projects, it's good to keep in mind, especially if anyone's thinking about this as a career path and going on to work on other projects at some point. So depending on the role, for either construction or maintenance, usually people have to stay out in the wind farm area for between 2 and 6 weeks at a time. I've heard they're fairly nice facilities. However, you're out there to work. So there's no alcohol on the vessels. There are designated smoking areas, but you can't smoke on the turbines. Again, the safety is really important. Sometimes there's good cell and Wi-Fi service, sometimes there's not. So that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking about how in touch, you want to be with your family. I've also heard that they usually have very nice gyms, a movie room, game rooms. If the rooms are shared, the way that it gets done is usually that's mostly for construction where crews are working 24 hours. So you would share a room with somebody who's working the other shift from you. So, the 12 hours that you're working, somebody's in the room, and then vice versa. But generally for operations and maintenance, individuals do have their own rooms out there while they're on their shift. And so the next video we have, which is the last in this presentation, is just showing what life on the accommodation vessel is like. And then from there, we'll be happy to take any additional questions that there may be for Holly, Richard, Eric, or myself. So thank you so much.
So I work from the vessel for Racebank Wind Farm, and we go out every 2 weeks, so we're 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and we live on here, and we run the wind farm from this SOV. I've been in the offshore wind industry for 5-6 years now. I go out and do servicing, troubleshooting, all sorts of turbine works, to be honest. Although we live on here, we don't work on here. You actually come back to a different area from your actual workplace, which is on the turbine. And all your teammates are here. If you want to go sit and watch a film together, you can do. If you want to, you're tired and you want to come to your room and, you know, have a bit of alone time, you can do it. It's easy to like maneuver yourself to your mood, if that makes sense.
So I'm the Deputy Operations Manager for Shift 1. So we have 2 Deputy Ops Managers and I take one role, a 2-week on, 2-week off shift rotation. What an SOV brings is effectively a flotel, if you like, that we can use to accommodate our technicians and support staff directly in the field. We can then use the walk-to-work system, the gangway system, to launch our troubleshoot teams or our service teams across directly onto the wind turbine. We've also then got the capability to allow a CTV to push onto the side of the vessel, so we can effectively react to a down turbine within an hour or so if we've got all the resources and all the plans are in place.
You go out in the morning, you're on the turbine within half an hour generally, and then you've got longer to work on the turbine, which normally means that services get done quicker.
When the site was created, if you like, and we employed people, you're not just looking at the technical qualities that the people bring, you've got to look at their personality as well and make sure that they can mix well with other people, that they're respectful, and that they are understanding of individual needs as well.
I do find it difficult to be away from my partner and my family, but you get used to it. Although I'm away for 2 weeks, I get 2 weeks of quality time at home. And if I had a 9-to-5 Monday to Friday job, I probably wouldn't spend as much time with my partner as I do. My colleagues are my family while I'm at work, and I have made some really good friends on here that would probably be my lifetime friends, and living with them, although it's different to living at home, but it's almost like I have 2 lives. I have my home life and I have my work life.
Thank you, Jen. I love those videos. They're fun to watch. Really interesting perspective for doing a really interesting career. Are there any questions at this time? You know, feel free to hop on to the chat or the Q&A. No question is silly or trivial. Everything that you could possibly want to know is worth asking right now. And then if there aren't any questions, I'm going to get into the certificate itself. So I don't see any questions at the moment. Feel free to keep typing questions in and we'll get to them as they come in. Let's see, I need to share my screen. So let's see. We'll do that right now. Okay, so hopefully you can see the certificate details here. Let me know if you can't. But this is a list of the classes that are being offered in the certificate that we've partnered with Bristol Community College to do. So ACE MV is a small nonprofit here on Martha's Vineyard, and we are dedicated to helping our residents get the training and education they need for their careers, for workforce development. Bristol already has an offshore wind program at their New Bedford campus, and we've taken that and modified it slightly to bring to the Vineyard so that it's specifically for Vineyard residents so that you can be trained and ready to enter the offshore wind workforce when the hiring begins. So if you're living away from Martha's Vineyard, if you're not here, please contact Bristol and I can help you get in touch with Dean Sarmad about enrolling directly through New Bedford. If you're here on the island, enroll through ACE. This program is especially for you and the website is www.acemv.org, and you'll find an application there. And then once you've filled out the application and sent that in, we'll get you rolling with the official registration from Bristol. So the details of this program, it's a 2 to 3 year part-time program. It's designed for people who work or who are in school. So it's meant to be a part-time program that you do in the evenings. It was 29 credits, now it's 23 total college credits. These can be applied directly toward an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree if you want to continue your education, or it results in the certificate for offshore wind technicians by itself. If you enroll now or in the next few weeks, you'll be entered into our cohort 2, which is beginning in late January, the week of January 25th. And the class is electrical machinery. And Dana Munn, I believe you're on the call. Dana is our instructor. He's a teacher at the Martha's Vineyard Regional High School, and he's also our vetted adjunct faculty for Bristol. And it will be taught online because of COVID. And he makes it a lot of fun. He brings a lot of enthusiasm and energy to this electrical machinery class. It can be taken as a single class. Last semester, we had a lot of electricians take it who wanted a bit more of a study into the theory of their work. And these people weren't necessarily going forward with the certificate, and that's fine. You can take it as a single class, in which case it's $655. If, however, you're really interested in moving forward with the Offshore Wind Technician Certificate and you really want to go into this industry, or you think you might, there's no commitment, then you sign up to be part of our cohort and you go through the entire certificate, in which case we have funding through MASS CEC for this cohort to reduce your tuition by half. So normally the classes would be $655, and on this list, you'll see $861, but because of this funding, we can offer it for this coming cohort if you enroll for January for half that price. Additional semesters and the sequence might change, but you'll be studying principles of ecology, wind power technology, wind power operations and maintenance, fluid systems, which is hydraulics, and offshore safety and survival. So that brings you to conclude your certificate through Bristol Community College. So ACEMV is organizing it for you. It's an official certificate from Bristol. So those are the classes that are involved in this certificate. And again, it's really meant to be convenient and designed for people who are already working or already in school. The electrical machinery class starting in January is going to be a 1 night a week class. It's 3 credits. And then after that, you'll have either 1 class per semester or 2. And I think that's the majority of the information for the curriculum itself. Are there any questions so far? I'm trying to open my chat just so that I can see if anything came through.
Holly,
I don't see any questions. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Holly, it's Richard. And do you show where people can register, or is that
yeah, let me bring up our website and I can show that. It's very simple, very straightforward. There's no cost to apply. The application process is free. And then also when you finally do enroll in the certificate program, you pay for each class as you take it. You don't have to pay for the whole thing at once, which again is trying to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved. All right, so let me share my screen again. So this is the ACEMV website. If you go to courses, trades and training, and over to Offshore Wind Tech Certification, you'll see some of the videos that we showed in the session this evening. And then if you just scroll down a little bit, apply for the program now, that brings you to an application form, and we ask some basic information about your previous history, your interest in working in the offshore wind workforce, your current occupation, and current employers. For instance, there may be some additional financing or funding available, scholarships for people who are commercial fishermen or the family member of a commercial fisherman. So definitely let us know if that applies to you. We want to know your current employment status and your education status. For instance, if you already have an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, it's possible that some courses you may have already taken them. But generally we're asking also if you live on the island, because it is geared for vineyard residents. So it's a very simple application. Once you complete that, we'll get in touch with you to let you know if you've been accepted, and then we'll get you enrolled in the electrical machinery class, and that will start you on your way toward this certificate. Does anyone else on the panel want to add anything?
I'd like to add, Holly, if I may, that the certificate program through Bristol is a part of a potential stackable education. So for example, if you really enjoy the certificate and you actually get gainfully employed, you can continue on to get an associate's degree. And in fact, you can continue on and all of the credits build up to be for a bachelor's degree. So it's nice, you know, you can tailor it to your own personal ambitions. As you mentioned, Holly, it's not a prerequisite to be hired in the industry, but we say it really increases your, or it makes you a very attractive candidate. But I just want to add about that stackable thing, you know, where you can continue your education on if that's what your desires are.
All right, so it's an exciting new industry that we're venturing into. I could just say on a personal note, I used to live in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, and I worked for a environmental advocacy nonprofit. And part of my job was to go up into West Virginia, where there was mountaintop removal, and that's the coal mining industry. And it's not a matter of just digging down to a coal seam and extracting a layer of coal. And instead, mountaintop removal is the complete destruction of entire forests and mountain ranges and valleys and rivers and wildlife, and everything's completely gone. The idea of offshore wind as a renewable resource is really appealing. It's environmentally friendly, it's ecologically 1,000 times better than something like mountaintop removal, or even just using fossil fuels in general. It's an exciting industry to come to Martha's Vineyard. It's exciting that Vineyard Wind is committing to hire residents of Martha's Vineyard for these projects. We're trying to keep everything as local as possible. These are great skills that are useful in a variety of settings. Just getting your foot in the door in this industry is a really smart thing to do at this time.
Very much so, Holly. I was mentioning in my presentation about the 25 to 30 technicians for the one project, but I also highlighted how many more projects are coming. If you go to the U.S. Department of Labor, in their statistics of the fastest growing jobs currently in the United States, the first one is solar installation and solar installers. And the second is wind turbine technicians. And when you literally, well, first of all, there's a very, very large established onshore wind turbine industry, wind farm industry in the United States, primarily in Maine, northern Maine, New York, and then down through the Great Plains into northern Texas. A lot of the skills that you will learn in offshore wind, and in fact, if you're employed in offshore wind, are transferable to land-based wind if your life takes you that way for whatever reason. And also, when I mentioned the turbine technicians for the project, if you just multiply that out over potentially 35 projects or 65 projects, you quickly get to thousands of technicians that are going to be required over the next 15 years. And although we're definitely focused on this project, as we've said many, many times, this is an industry and a career that you can get on the ground floor and really have a successful career with a lot of flexibility in where you decide to live.
I'd just like to add to what Holly was saying and what Richard was also saying. First of all, let me introduce myself. This is Dr. Yashwant Sinha from Bristol Community College. And just want to illustrate something in regards to the academic program, and then I'll also come down to the offshore wind industry as well. In terms of the academic program, we have a certificate level program that is offered at New Bedford campus. And that particular program is a 29 credit 2-semester program, having many modules, many of the modules that are common to what is being offered at Martha Vineyards. Apart from that, we also have as a step ahead, that's an Associate in Sciences program. That is, if you are doing the certificate program, then it will be possible for you to transfer those credits onto the associate level program. So it will be a higher degree in that particular case. But also, if you want to pursue this career for further, you can also kind of get into like bachelor's degree and PhDs and things like that going forward. So there's no stopping there. One of the important things over here is this is kind of a turning point, if I can say, in terms of the renewable energy sector. The power generation capacity of offshore wind is tremendous. If you would have seen some news lately in the UK, which is also the pioneers of offshore wind, they are not talking about generating all of the electrical power using offshore wind by 2030. That's tremendous news. So the potential, if you want to see with the amount of offshore locations which US has, it can be a huge potential for US as well. Not only US, the offshore wind industry is global at the moment. Growing next 30 years, we're expecting like 520 gigawatts from current, like not more than below 50 gigawatts at the moment. So we're looking at a huge amount of opportunity here that is expected to kind of open up a new renewable energy sector and kind of a good career pathways for the future. Given that the prospects exist and the demand will be there in the future, we are trying to develop academic programs, not only the certificate programs and the associate level program, but going forward, we might try to develop some short-term programs, but that's in the pipeline as the future unfolds and as the demands come in. But at the same time, currently we are offering quite a lot of facilities at BCC, wherein safety programs, offshore maintenance, and reliability programs, and things like that. So we are gearing up for this particular industry, and as we go forward, we want you all to come forward with that as well, so that the future for the offshore wind industry, we can be kind of partners in that. If you have any questions or anything, I'm more than happy to take it.
Thank you, Yashwant. So I don't see any other questions. Unless anyone else has anything, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists very much for being with us here tonight. And thank you to everyone who attended. If you're interested in getting more information, myself, I'm totally willing to provide anything and to answer questions. Richard Andre, I know, is available to answer questions about the industry and the future and how things work. Go to the asmv.org website. The application is easy to fill out. The sooner you do it, the better. We'll get you in our system and we'll get you registered for the first class electrical machinery that starts in about 6 weeks. It'll be a lot of fun. So thank you, everyone. We look forward to working with you.